So, welcome to Greenfield's Connecting During COVID video interviews. These interviews are designed to help us connect as a community of faith and share ideas and stories of interest and inspiration. And so, today I am talking with Kent Carlson about spiritual formation during the time of COVID. And Kent serves as a Vice President of Leadership Formation with the North American Baptist Conference, who, if you didn't know, that's our tribe that we are members of at Greenfield Community Church. So, Kent, welcome to our video cast.
Thanks. Good to be here, Tyler. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so this is a different time that we find ourselves in, and so I guess how is California? It seems like it's pretty similar to Alberta in some ways in terms of the number of cases, but how are things going there?
Well, I think our governor jumped on things pretty quickly and has had a firm, I think, grasp of the situation. Has listened to experts. Has been very decisive, and across the board, frankly, I think he's received some very good reviews. And California's doing what it can to flatten the curve, and there seems to be good advances being made. Obviously, it shakes up the economy pretty strongly, not only all over the world. But people, you get the outliers who are minimizing issues and such. But for the most part, I think people are paying attention, staying home, keeping their physical distance. And for some people, obviously, it's been incredibly traumatic. People are losing jobs. People obviously are dying. There's some fear and anxiety. But I think people are weathering the storm fairly well and connecting with each other and serving each other whenever they can.
That's good. So now, of course, you were a pastor for many years, and you, I guess, you're a pastor to pastors, and in your role with leadership development and formation with the NAB. So I guess the biggest question here that it comes up is, well, what do you think has changed and what has stayed the same for the church during this time of COVID? And what do you think, like, how do we do spiritual formation and mission, at this time?
Yeah, I think it's it is a great opportunity. And by the way, for who's ever listening out here or watching this out here, I want to say that is probably the most extraordinary beard I have seen in a very long time. That is impressive. It gives me a goal to shoot for over this next year or so. So I just started, but I'm gonna yeah, it's beautiful. You should be proud of that one. But I think churches are there is some danger that we don't learn the good things we need to learn during this time. I think everyone, to a large degree, is trying to figure out how to do this best, and so many of our instincts are good. But I think what it does expose to us is that, to a large degree, the church in the West is oriented around the building and the Sunday morning service. And that's been, to some degree, taken away from us, and we're trying to, in many ways, try to recapture it. And all those desires, the live streaming and everything are good. We should be, I'm sure, pursuing it. But Alan Hirsch had this little picture or metaphor that I saw Brian Sanders pick up on the Sunday morning service, or the church is like a chess game, and the Sunday morning service in the building is the queen, and it's the most powerful thing, and we build our whole strategy around that. But right now the queen's been taken away, and to a large degree, we're able to begin to learn how to use all the other pieces on the chessboard in an effective way that many people typically don't, as long as you have the queen. That doesn't mean the queen is not crucially important and powerful in terms of presenting who we are as Christians to the world and our worship of God and such. But not having the queen for a little bit can help us to rethink all these other parts of the church, all these other roles, the ways we can interact with each other, be in a community, be scattered out, the simple connections we make one-on-one and in groups. And when we move into that area and learn from that area, then we're able to bring back the queen, as it were, the building and the Sunday morning service more effectively, we can use it not as the sole thing, but a very powerful thing among a lot of other things that that are going on. And I think there is always a danger of not learning that during this time. And we spend all of our energy trying to duplicate what we really can't duplicate very well, and then not learn what we can learn. Formationally, if you wanted me to play into that area, I could speak for pastors here. I've noticed this a bit, that some of the ugly side of ambition and competing and comparing has come up. That's been kind of settled over the last decade or so. A lot of people have spoken to that, but now it's whoever can put the best online service together. People starting to count the number of hits they have, or number of views, or the number of likes, and as though this is information that actually gives us important data. And then other passengers simply don't have the technological know-how or don't have the resources. They're feeling guilty because they're not doing it as well as the guy down the street. And so that comparing and competing is never good for us formationally. We always begin to drift towards this not enoughness that we have during this time. But I think for everybody, for those who are in the more non-essential professions that are staying at home, this excess time, it sometimes causes us, I think, or it sometimes is a temptation to not pay attention to some of the perhaps internal noise that is there. And so because of the maybe discomfort of having all this extra time in our hand, we engage into whatever indulgences we may engage in, binge eating, binge watching TV, perhaps less healthy things like alcohol and such, to a large degree, to kind of fill up that space. And so we don't perhaps take this time to attend to what we need to attend to in our own souls. A lot of people in my conversations are feeling and I have had some of this myself, some waves of depression, and wanting that sadness or that isolation or something to go away, as opposed to sitting in it, paying attention to it, have some good friends that you you talk to about it. So I think it's a formational challenge for the church as a community, and how we understand the nature of the church, but also for us as individuals, to carve out the space to actually be not just physically alone, but perhaps spiritually, mentally alone with ourselves, and embrace that solitude.
Right. So, that makes me think of in January and February here, we did a short sermon series on the common rule and sort of habits, and we've kind of revisited that in one of these interviews with Andrew Skinner that I did. But it seems to me that this is the time where it would be very easy for us to fall back into bad habits, and like you said, to indulge or like some of these other issues that we would have. But this should be seen for those, at least, who aren't, like, it seems interesting. Let me back up, because some are bored and have a lot of extra time. Other people are extremely busy and
Right.
are trying to manage family and
Yep.
work and everything. So it's not sort of the same
Right.
for everyone. It's a different experience. But nonetheless, at this time, I guess what I hear you saying is that we always can, there's always space that we need to carve out to attend to our own spiritual health, to our own souls, and to sort of remember some of those things that we need to lean into at this time,
Right.
and some of our habits. So are there, let's just be very practical, like, maybe, like, is there three things that you can think of that our people, like, in terms of, so not talking to pastors, but talking to just the average person who would be in the pew if we did have Sunday morning services, but for the average Christ follower, So are there three things that you think that we could lean into or work on at this time?
Well, I would, the first thing that comes to my mind, and often it's the first thing that comes to my mind in these questions, regardless of what situation we're in, is the pursuit and embracing of solitude. In solitude, which is the purposeful removing of ourselves from the presence of others, some of us are actually uh, put into this right now. And that's where I go back to the danger then of trying to fill that time with things that are perhaps unhealthy. And so some of that is to embrace the solitude, not run from it, but notice what is happening internally, notice the depression, notice a sense of my worth being, I have some sense of being not enough because I'm not accomplishing the things that I typically accomplish, or I'm not accomplishing as much as the person I know down the street is.
Right.
But in solitude, those props that we use to justify our existence get kicked out. And then we have we have the privilege of discovering that in that time that I actually exist. I have a soul, and that it is in that kind of nothingness where I'm not trying to impress anybody. It's there where we actually can make our deepest commitments to God. And so I would pursue the solitude more proactively, or with a deeper intentionality. I think here's a real simple one. I think the danger of not caring for ourselves physically during this time is a big deal. We can begin to spend a lot more time sitting, a lot less time walking out in nature if we're allowed, in the various places we're in, to kind of get the exercise that is necessary. Depression is so often fed by sedentary. How do you say the word? Sedentary? I always get
Yeah.
mixed up. But that, where you're just sitting around. And so I think it's really crucial to have frankly, just the physical exercise, and to get up and move around if someone job is such now that they're not doing that.
Hmm.
And I think it's not always helpful, perhaps, or it's difficult, and it takes some adjustment with these Zoom calls or the other kind of FaceTime, or ways in which we can communicate with each other. But I think we need to be very proactive in maintaining deep friendships and contacts with others. We get together in some calls and just hang out and share some of the things that's going on. Tell the truth about yourself. Don't let darkness or secrecy kind of creep in there, so uh, we don't lean on each other the way we really need to. And this isolation will have a tendency, for those who are isolated, will have a tendency for many, I think, to drift in that aloneness, and that could be a bit of a problem. I still think the solitude is crucial. If we pursue relationships without the solitude, we end up simply bringing our our brokenness and our loneliness to another person, wanting that person to fix it, and they can't, and so therefore we end up getting more lonely. But it's out of the solitude and our awareness of God in those times, we bring that to other people, and that solitude meets solitude in the best of situations, and deep connection can happen there. So those are three that come to my mind.
Right. Okay. Um, so, when you were pastoring at Oak Hills there in Folsom,
Mhm.
you were one of the founding pastors, and it was a successful, I guess, seeker sensitive church, and so um, you had this shift, that this experience with God and your leadership there, and that you led the church through some pretty massive changes from sort of the seeker sensitive church to a church focused more on spiritual formation and mission. Um, and and I guess so. Something about leading through change at this time. So, is there? Um, I guess, are there, what advice do you have for churches as for the people of God, as we, go through this time? So we've already mentioned sort of, don't kind of fall back into some of the bad habits, and these three uh, things to focus on. But is there any other advice that you would just generally give?
Yeah, I think there's in times of crisis, um, uh, that when there's a lack of clarity of leadership during the time of crisis, you have people filling up that vacuum with all sorts of fears, agendas, conspiracy theories, uh, imagining what other people are thinking, and they kind of jump in, and so it compounds the crisis by small-minded thinking and selfish thinking, self-absorbed thinking. So I really think it's crucially important for the leadership of a church, leadership, frankly, of any organization, to be tight during this time, to be really on guard towards criticism that tends to erode trust or erode friendship. I know what happened when we made the huge monstrous change at Oak Hills. We lost around 1,500 people during this time, and so there was a monster run on the bank, and there was a lot of insecurity and worry, and then people are pointing fingers and blaming, and there was plenty of blame to go around. I mean, I made colossal mistakes simply because I wasn't a good enough person. But the one thing that remained steady for us is that our leadership team, we always believed in each other. We
Mhm.
argued stuff out when we needed to, but nobody ever broke ranks. Everybody always gave each other grace. The elder board allowed me to make my mistakes without punishing me or ridiculing me. They just continued to believe in me and I in them. And the other senior pastor, my co-senior pastor, and him as well. And uh, this kept us going during darker times. So if you don't, I think the clarity of the leadership team, having been through a process of discernment where they're having a sense of what God is leading us to do and to be, and we're going to pursue that imperfectly, obviously, and in ways that make mistakes and perhaps hurt other people. Uh, but when we are together as a team, as a leadership team, and it's a real deep kind of spiritual sense of trust and love for each other. We just wouldn't use this opportunity to harm another person or to take cheap shots. We have this bigger picture in mind. And so, as you can imagine, that kind of change of the church, that kind of numbers of people leaving, there were a lot of accusations, some of which were true. And if the leadership had broken ranks during that time, it could have irreparably harmed the church. So I think time spent with leadership together, time spent um, with people where you ask below the surface questions. You try to get someone to actually respond to how they're doing, and you just don't give up, and you just say, hey, I know this has got to be a tough time. How are you holding up? I know you guys have been underwater a little financially, so what's really happening? How you handling that now? And then they tell you some stuff, and then you pray for them, you send them texts, you hang out, and you maintain that connection of I don't be all sappy about this, but where we really learn to love each other really well, and we feel that love. We feel that love for each other, and we feel it in return. So there's all sorts of theories about change management and how to do it, and there's good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. But ultimately, if I had to step back and look at one overarching thing, it was this commitment you have to each other as a team as you walk through these times.
Right. And so that's obviously applicable to the leadership team, but it's also applicable, I would think, to almost any group
Yes,
in
sir.
the church, that at this time, to, like, we need to show each other extra grace. We need to
Yep.
be sure to pray for one another, support one another, help one another. Like how can we, especially, and we have to be creative, I guess, at this time, to how do we love one another?
Yep.
Because I think the reality is too is that the world is looking at the church, and you know what, it's and that is sort of part of our witness together, as we've just been coming through a sermon series on the Gospel of John this whole year, and of course, their love is supreme, right, in terms of love one another, and that's how people will know that you're my disciples, Jesus says. And so, um, so no, that's good, and I think that's something
Well,
that we have to just keep and remember. So yeah,
just piggybacking on that a little bit more, you use the word creativity, and I really, really like that. I think there's a sense in which we can receive from this situation as not something that is obviously it's tragic and so harmful, and obviously people are dying and losing jobs, and so it's not in any way a statement that this is a great gift in
yeah,
that way, but it is an opportunity, I think, for us to come together in this sense of unity and pursuing and seeking to discern who God wishes us to be in this time. There will be needs in the community that will come out that we perhaps have not seen before. Needs in ourselves as a community of faith, and with creative ideas of how to meet them. And in this whole process, I think as not just leaders in the church, but the whole church collectively can discern what God is doing among us and enter into this. And this actually then can become a time of great spiritual fruitfulness and growth and mission. But not if we are overwhelmed with how to keep all the same things running in the same way. I think we have to receive this tragedy and this pandemic in such a way that we can discern who God is calling us to be and what is He calling us to do in our particular venue.
great, great. So no, that's great. So thank you very much
My pleasure.
for this. And now, okay, one question. I know you're a huge Cubs fan.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
so are they going to win the World Series this year?
Well, the whole tragedy of one of the largest tragedies of this corona virus is the loss of baseball here. It's just really, I mean, I have this whole ritual which I need to plug better into the church calendar, but this whole athletic calendar where spring training comes and then baseball starts, and we're already, half a month of loss of games, and who knows when they'll start. And so I'm trying to figure out some meaning for my life now without baseball, and so that's one of the challenges. As for the World Series, yeah, I expect every year to win the World Series, of course.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can relate. Not so much baseball, but hockey. Of course, all the Canadians. The Oilers are going to win the Stanley Cup this year, but and that's still yet to be seen. Of course, football and so yeah, it is. Stephanie, Pastor Stephanie, always will joke me that if a sermon doesn't have some sort of sports analogy in it, then it's not a real sermon for me. And it's
Right.
been tough to think about stuff to preach on because there's no sports going on.
I
So,
know it's sad.
but yeah. Anyways, so thank you very much. And now I should just say too is that now the hope is, and who knows if this is going to happen or not, but we do have you booked to come to Edmonton in October
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
to a conference here for our people at Greenfield Community Church, um, and my hope and prayer is that it will go ahead, and maybe we'll have to see what the times will hold, but at the very least, maybe we could do an online thing, or we'll have
Yeah,
to
well,
see.
I'm hoping it'll happen too. I'm living under that assumption that you
Yeah,
receive the world as it comes to you. But yes,
yeah.
I hope to be with you guys.
Okay. Well, thank you very much,
Pleasure.
and
Thanks for having me.
blessings on you. So.
Thanks. Thanks.